a common misconception is that because China has been, growing exponentially over the last 2 decades, it can now outbid Taiwan. But it's not true, because the fewer diplomatic allies Taiwan has, the more Taiwan can spend or is willing to allocate to retain their diplomatic allegiance. So Taiwan has the disadvantage of having to be accountable to the public opinion. So Taiwanese public opinion can object on how much money is spent for a particular diplomatic ally. But Taiwan still has some appeal to the islands. First, it is a democracy, so it's not perceived as imperialist as sometimes the Chinese are. It delivers very good aid in terms of agricultural projects, development projects in general, health, education. And I can quote a legislator from Palau who was asked, why is Palau not shifting to China, to the big fish? And the politicians very wisely said, yes, China is a big fish, but a big fish could sink our small canoe. So Taiwan still has bargaining power in the South Pacific. And I believe, if you want to know the figures, Taiwan roughly spends from 10 to 15 million US dollars per year for each diplomatic ally. Of course, it can increase the amount of this, the aid if necessary. But given that now, the two sides of the strait have achieved a diplomatic truce of a tacit understanding that they won't try to steal the opponent's diplomatic ally. It's quite likely that Taiwan will be able to maintain its diplomatic allies in the Pacific and in other theaters in the near future. The so-called Austronesian link gives Taiwan an additional advantage in its diplomatic competition with China in the South Pacific. Taiwan certainly has a connection with the South Pacific. China, in a broad sense, hasn't. For this reason, Taiwan can, implement and further so-called cultural diplomacy toward the Pacific Island states, and it's, I think, perfectly legitimate. It's the cultural communalities are at base of supranational entities like the European Union or other regional organizations. Global warming is a huge issue for the for some island microstates, Tuvalu, Marshall Islands, but even the bigger states like Solomon Islands are suffering the negative consequences of the phenomenon. The case of Tuvalu is particularly tragic. If the trend will continue, it is likely, it is possible that Tuvalu will disappear from the world maps. So what to do with the population of Tuvalu, roughly 10,000 people? It seems that Australia is not leaning to accept them as environmental refugees, while Taiwan has declared it will be ready in principle to give those people a shelter. Taiwan is actively committed to alleviate the consequences of global warming in Tuvalu or Marshall Islands. There are several projects in place. um, still, the global warming highlights the condition of vulnerability of those islands.